The moment I step foot inside the school, I get a face full of dark smoke. It goes in my eyes, my nose, and down my throat, making it difficult to see and breathe. Everything inside me begs me to turn around and go back outside where the air is clean and actually breathable, but I push forward. I manage to make it up the stairs to the 3rd floor, but I quickly realize that I don't know where the biology lab is. So I begin roaming any hallway that isn't completely on fire, desperately searching for the lab. The smoke is somehow even worse on the 3rd floor than where I entered the school, which I didn't think was possible. It's becoming so thick that I'm actually walking around blindly, so I have to try something else or I'll never find the lab. So I stop walking around, close my eyes, and listen closely for the sound of voices. The only noises I hear are the roar of the fire and what sounds like a wall collapsing somewhere on the 2nd floor. I begin walking forward with my eyes still closed, knowing that it's probably a bad idea to walk around a burning building blindly, but this is the only way I'm going to find the trapped biology class. As I listen for voices, I think about how the only reason I'm still alive right now has to be thanks to whatever radiation I was exposed to from the meteor. By this point, I should have passed out from smoke inhalation or be severely burned by the flames, but I feel mostly unharmed. Luke had tried to convince me that the radiation from the meteor hadn't given me any abilities, but I now know that he was definitely wrong. However, I also know that my head is beginning to feel woozy and my throat is drier than the Sahara Desert. So despite whatever that meteor did to me, I can't survive in this school much longer. Just as I reach the end of a hallway and consider turning around in case I walked past the lab, I hear something. The noise is so faint that I almost miss it, but I concentrate on the sound and take a few steps towards it. Then, I'm able to make out a girl's terrified voice.
Help! Please help us!
My eyes snap open at the first sound of life I've heard since entering the school, and I run in the direction of the voice. As I get closer, I hear more and more voices pleading for help, which just makes me run even faster. I finally make it to the furthest hallway of the 3rd floor and see the green double doors of the biology lab, which are blocked by a massive burning wooden beam. I get as close to the biology lab doors as possible and see that whoever's trapped inside are desperately pounding on the doors, trying to get them open, but the beam won't budge. The only way to free the trapped biology class is to move the burning beam. So I reach out and grab it. Immediately, I have to let go of the beam because the heat is unbearable. As I shake my hands in an attempt to cool them, I notice a thin layer of white smoke coming off them. Hesitantly, I open my palms, scared of the damage I did to them. But aside from being covered in a bit of black ash, they seem to be perfectly fine. Now that I'm certain the heat won't badly hurt me, I turn my attention back to the beam. I take a few deep breaths, trying to prepare myself for the pain. Then, for a second time, I grab the burning beam. This time, I don't let go and instead try to lift it. My hands scream in pain, but I ignore them and, fueled by the sounds of people desperately yelling and pounding on the doors, I pull the beam away from the biology lab. As soon as I manage to lift the burning beam a safe distance from the doorway, I throw it to the ground. I instantly look down at my hands, nearly in tears by how much they hurt, and find that they look a lot worse than last time. They're bright red and covered in harsh-looking blisters. But as far as I can tell, there isn't any serious damage. So I try my best to ignore the pain in my hands and turn back to the now unblocked doors. Although the doors are now clear, the beam had damaged the lock and they still won't open for the students. However, after having just lifted a giant wooden beam that was on fire, kicking down a set of metal doors seems like a piece of cake. The excitement that the class is nearly free almost causes me to just kick down the doors without saying anything. Luckily, I realize just how stupid that would be, since everyone is standing directly on the other side of the doors and I would just end up hurting someone. "Stand clear of the doors!" I yell, loud enough for them to hear over the noise of the fire. Instantly, I hear the sound of footsteps scrambling away from the doors. After I wait a few seconds to make sure that everyone is out of the way, I kick the middle of the doors as hard as I can and they both go flying inward. I quickly step inside the room and find a group of 20 or so students and one teacher all huddled together against the far wall. Everyone just stares at me in shock as I take a quick look around the room to discover that it's mostly intact, with only a few minor scorches around the doorframe. I turn my attention back to the biology class, who luckily all seem to be unharmed, but are also too terrified to speak. However, after getting over his initial shock, one familiar student steps forward. Josh? What the hell happened to you? Chris asks. No hi, how's it going? No thank you for risking your life to save us. Nope, the only thing people want to talk about is why have I suddenly gained a bunch of muscle. That's not important, I tell him. We have to get out of here now. Everyone quickly leaves the room with the teacher leading the way. The second the last student is out, I follow them down the same hallway that I had taken to get here. I have no idea if the teacher can actually see where he's going through the smoke, but I don't have time to check with him because as soon as I'm out of the biology lab, I notice parts of the walls are beginning to crumble. The fire is causing the school to literally fall apart all around us. Our group moves through the school as quickly as possible while trying to avoid the flames and falling debris. As we take a left down a new hallway, a girl in front of me steps on a weak section of the floor that immediately gives out under her weight. She screams as she begins to fall through the floor and down into the flames below us, but I react quickly and grab her by the arm. I pull her back up with one arm like she's weightless, and we keep running like nothing happened because we don't have time to react. Once again, I'm tempted to close my eyes as we run through the school because of how much the smoke is bothering me. However, I notice that it seems like it's far worse for everyone else because I can hear a chorus of violent coughing over the near deafening roar of the flames. I just hope the smoke isn't doing any major damage to their lungs. As our group takes a sharp left down another new hallway, I recognize the classrooms as the same ones I passed when I was first escaping the school with Tessa. I realize that we're almost out of the school, and I begin silently celebrating how I actually managed to save 20 people from a burning building. However, my celebration is premature, as suddenly, half the students in front of me stop running and begin screaming in horror at something. A giant roof beam completely consumed in flames and at least 3 times the size as the one I lifted off the biology lab doors is falling from the ceiling directly above us. From my position at the back of the group, I can see that the beam will land right in the middle of the class, and the students aren't getting out of its way fast enough. Without hesitation, I plow through all the students in front of me, trying to knock as many of them to the floor as possible, and stand right under the giant falling beam just as it's about to land. I hold my hands above my head and catch the massive burning beam before it has a chance to crush any of the students. The second it makes contact with my already injured hands, I drop to one knee from both the pain it's causing me and the sheer weight of the beam. I manage to get back on 2 feet while still holding the beam above my head. My eyes are nearly closed from the strain, but I manage to see that half of the class is in front of me and the other half is behind me, meaning that I can't set the beam down without trapping half the students. With some struggle, I manage to turn my head just enough to see the students behind me, who are still lying on the floor staring at me like idiots as I'm barely able to keep them from being crushed. Through grit teeth, I tell them, "Go!" because it's obvious that they aren't going to move unless I say something. Slowly, they shake off their daze and get up from the floor. Then, one by one, they carefully pass under the beam and join the rest of the group a safe distance away on the other side. Once everyone has passed me, I desperately want to drop the beam, but I don't because I can feel the floor crumbling beneath my feet. The second I drop the beam, the entire hallway floor will collapse under the weight. So despite my hands crying out in agony and my arms feeling like they're about to fall off, I don't let go of the beam. I look past the group and see a familiar wall of debris blocking the end of the hallway. Even though the strain on my body is making it nearly impossible to think, I have to tell the group how to get out of the school. Somehow, I'm able to yell out, "Go into the first classroom to your left and keep going through the holes in the walls until you get to the end of the hallway. From there, head down the stairs and you'll find a broken part of the wall that you can escape through." Most of the students start to enter the classroom, but a few of them, including Chris, don't move. "What about you?" he yells back. The beam nearly slips out of my hands because of how much I'm struggling with it, but I manage to keep holding on. "Once I drop this beam, the whole floor is going to collapse. I'll be able to find a different way out, but you and everybody else need to go now." Finally, Chris realizes that there's no other way, so he turns and follows everyone else. I wait a few seconds to make sure that he isn't coming back before dropping the beam in front of me. The second it makes contact with the ground, the floor begins collapsing. I turn and sprint back the way we came, barely outrunning the crumbling floor that follows me. The only other way out of the school that I can think of is the destroyed computer room wall from when the meteor hit the school. So, the best plan that I can come up with is to just jump out of the opening in the outer wall and fall from a height that would probably kill a normal person. Somehow, through the blinding smoke, I managed to find the hallway that the computer room is down. As I run down the hallway, I try to think about the best way of jumping out of the school without killing myself. However, the only thing I managed to come up with is that I should just jump and hope I don't die. Great. Just as I'm about to reach the computer room, I pass by an open classroom door and something inside the room catches my eye. I stop and see an unconscious student lying in the middle of the room with flames all around them. After I get over the shock of how there is still someone left inside the school, I run into the classroom and kneel down beside the students. I roll them over and get a clear look at who it is. Mike Wilson. I have no idea why Mike is still in the school, but I don't give it much thought. The only thing I can think about is how this guy tortured me for months, beat me up almost every week, and did whatever else he could to make my life at school a living hell. Seeing him lying on the floor, completely defenseless, a small, dark part of me thinks about how I could just leave him here and nobody would know. However, I quickly shake that terrible thought out of my head and put my ear to his chest. Thankfully, I can hear his heartbeat, and it also seems like he's breathing okay. Even though I'm no doctor, I know these are pretty good signs that Mike is still alive. The sound of a nearby wall collapsing reminds me of the imminent danger I'm in, and I have to get Mike and I out of the school before the entire building collapses. I pick Mike up and drape him over my shoulder. When I do, a phone falls out of his hands, and I realize that he was probably in the classroom because he wanted to take pictures inside the burning school but got knocked out from all the smoke inhalation. What a dumbass. With Mike on my shoulder, I walk out of the classroom and into what remains of the computer room. The room is pretty well the same as when Tessa and I had left it, except that its inner walls are almost completely consumed in flames, and even more of the floor has caved in. Luckily, there seems to be just enough floor remaining along the far side of the room that I have a straight shot at an open section of the wall. I figure that my best chance of surviving this fall will be to get a running start. So, after I make sure that Mike is still secure on my shoulder, I take off in a sprint towards the wall. I feel the floor crumbling away beneath my weight, so I'm not getting another chance at this. With the flames closing in around me and the smoke so thick I can hardly breathe, I make it to the destroyed wall and push off its edge as hard as I can. Mike and I shoot out of the computer room and fly up through the air until we're nearly at the same height as the school's roof. As I weightlessly drift through the air with the wind blowing in my face, I think to myself that this must be what it feels like to fly. In the few seconds that Mike and I are soaring through the air, I think back to how the radiation from the meteor had somehow made me stronger, faster, and nearly resistant to fire. So is it really much of a stretch that it could have also given me the ability to fly? However, the instant that thought pops into my head, Mike and I stop ascending and begin quickly falling towards the ground. As I watch the ground get closer and closer, I manage to position Mike on top of me so that I will take the majority of the impact, and he'll have my body to cushion his fall. After everything this guy has put me through, I should be using his face as a pillow, but I ignore this thought, close my eyes, and brace for impact. The second we hit the ground, I feel the wind get knocked out of me. I end up landing on my back with Mike on top of me. But instead of coming to a complete stop on impact, we end up sliding for a few meters. When I finally feel that we're no longer moving, I slowly open my eyes, expecting to have at least a few broken bones. I lift up my head and then raise both my arms and legs, making sure to wiggle my fingers and toes. And I discover that nothing seems to be broken. In fact, aside from a mild headache and some sore ribs, I feel perfectly fine. Once I'm done making sure I'm alright, I examine the still unconscious Mike, who is resting comfortably on top of me with his head on my chest. Although it's hard for me to tell if he has any broken bones from the fall, I made sure that I absorbed most of the impact, and it seems that Mike barely felt a thing. So I gently push Mike off me and then, with a bit of effort, get to my feet. I feel a bit unbalanced from the fall, but I still manage to pick Mike up and begin carrying him towards the school parking lot. I take my time walking to the parking lot because I'm still trying to catch my breath after having the wind knocked out of me. By the time I come around the corner of the school, I already feel a bit better. But when the parking lot comes into view, I'm so surprised at what I see that I nearly drop Mike. The army jeeps and tricked out prison bus that were pulling into the parking lot when I ran into the school are now parked along the perimeter of the parking lot. The 5 jeeps form a semicircle around the bus. Although I have never seen any military vehicles up close before, as I study the jeeps, I can tell that they look a bit more advanced than what you would expect. As I continue to get closer to the parking lot, I notice at least 20 soldiers patrolling the area. The soldiers are all dressed identically in black combat gear with orange trim, dark sunglasses, and black combat helmets. They are also all armed with rifles, which makes me feel even more uneasy about their arrival. And from the looks of how small the crowd of people now is compared to when I first ran into the school, I'm not the only one who doesn't like the look of these soldiers. Before I ran into the school, none of the students were in any rush to climb onto the buses because they were too interested in watching the school go up in flames. However, there's now hardly anyone left in the parking lot, and the remaining number of students is still shrinking because the soldiers are basically forcing people to get on the last bus at gunpoint. Needless to say, most people are now eager to get onto a bus because it means getting as far away from the people with guns as possible. The only thing about what I'm watching play out that actually makes me feel better is that I can see that most of the students getting on the bus are the ones that I rescued from the biology lab. A part of me had been worried that they might not have made it out of the school, but as far as I can tell, everyone from the class is accounted for. Just as I'm about to step onto the edge of the parking lot, the soldiers finally spot me. All of them immediately forget about the crowd of people and turn their attention to me. They all start advancing towards me with their guns drawn. Move up, we've got another one!
Get your hands up, kid.
I stand there frozen as the soldiers form a semicircle around me. I've never even seen a gun in real life before, much less had one pointed at me, so I have no idea what I should do. Kid, please put that guy down on the ground. In all the commotion, I almost forgot that I'm still holding Mike. I gently set him down on the grass beside me. When I do, he lets out a groan and moves one of his arms. I'm relieved to see that he's beginning to stir, but I have to turn my attention back to the soldiers. They all seem to be a bit more relaxed now that I followed their orders and put Mike down. I, on the other hand, am starting to get a little pissed off since these guys are holding a kid who hasn't done anything wrong at gunpoint. Just as I'm about to tell these guys off, I catch myself, realizing that it probably isn't the smartest thing to do. These soldiers are trying to decide if I'm a friend or a threat, just as I'm trying to figure out the same about them. So, telling them to screw off isn't going to help them make up their minds. The best thing I can do to make these guys trust me is to somehow show them that I'm not a threat. I look back down at Mike and get an idea. I just carried this guy out of the school and he needs medical attention, I tell them. They all seem pretty surprised by this and begin looking at one another, wondering how to respond. It seems like they were expecting me to pull a gun on them or something, but instead, I just asked if they would help an injured kid. At first, none of the soldiers say anything, and I almost expect them to just tell me to shut up. Then, the soldier standing directly in front of me looks behind him and waves his arm in my direction. Out of nowhere, 2 soldiers jog over to us with a gurney. They stop next to Mike, carefully lift him onto the gurney, and then push him towards their bus. I just have to trust that they're taking him to get medical attention and not torturing him for information or something. Just as I start to think that maybe these guys aren't that bad since they're helping Mike, I hear something that scares me even more than being held at gunpoint.
Josh, what's going on?
I look past the soldiers and see a terrified-looking Tessa being led to their bus by 3 other armed soldiers. Tessa seems like she can barely walk, but when she sees me looking at her, she seems to gain a bit of strength back. What the hell is this? I yell at the soldiers before starting to run towards Tessa. However, the second I move, every soldier who surrounds me steps forward and begins barking orders. Freeze! Don't move or we will shoot! As much as I desperately want to, I know that the only thing running over to Tessa will accomplish is getting me shot. So, as angry as I am at these soldiers, I do what they say and stand there with my hands up. While I wait for the soldiers to say something else, I look back over at Tessa. She had been looking at me, and when she noticed the soldiers yelling at me, she stopped walking, which prompts one of the soldiers behind her to give her a light shove. Since she isn't expecting it, Tessa stumbles but doesn't fall. However, she's beginning to look as angry as I feel. I start to grow impatient as I wait for the soldiers to say something, so I decide that this has gone on for long enough. I don't know what you guys are hoping to accomplish by standing there with your guns on me. I am not a threat, so will you please just lower them and explain to me what the hell is going on? None of the soldiers move or say anything at first, so I figure they're just going to ignore my question. Then, the same soldier who motioned for Mike to be put on a gurney takes a step forward and says to me, "I was about to ask you the same question." He seems like he's about to say more, but is cut off by the screeching sound of rusty brakes. The soldiers and I look over to the entrance of the parking lot to see a school bus pull in. Everyone is so on edge that all the soldiers closest to the bus instinctively point their guns at the driver. The bus driver was obviously not expecting to be greeted by a bunch of armed soldiers when he was only supposed to be picking up students from the school. From where I stand, I can faintly hear one of the soldiers say to the driver, "Sir, please exit the vehicle." The terrified-looking bus driver scrambles to get out of the bus as fast as possible. He gets out of the bus so quickly, in fact, that he forgets to put it in park. Before the driver has a chance to hop back on the bus, it begins moving. The soldiers standing in front of the bus have to dive out of the way to avoid being run over. I watch the driver and a few soldiers desperately try and run after the bus, but it had already gained momentum and is now moving too quickly. I notice that the crowd of students who haven't evacuated yet are mainly gathered in the middle of the parking lot. I look from the crowd of students to the out-of-control school bus and realize that the bus is heading straight for the crowd. The soldiers around me realize this at the same time I do, and they all spring into action. "Everybody get out of the way!" I hear one soldier yell as they all race towards the crowd of people. Students finally begin to notice the yellow bus of death that's racing towards them. Everyone screams and gets out of the way as quickly as possible. However, I see that a few people are getting knocked to the ground in the chaos. It's likely that these students might not be able to get back up in time to get out of the way. I run towards the crowd of students as fast as I can. Most of the soldiers are already there picking people up off the ground and getting them to safety, but I don't know if they're moving fast enough. I manage to get close to where everyone has gathered safely out of the way of the bus. Just as the bus is about 20 meters away from us, I hear a high-pitched scream coming from somewhere close by. I follow the scream and see a girl lying face down right in front of where the bus is heading. She'll get run over if she doesn't move, but despite everyone yelling at her to get out of the way, she stays frozen from fear. I take off running towards her at top speed, but I can tell that I won't be able to make it to her in time. Suddenly, I see one of the soldiers run out from behind a nearby jeep close to where the girl is lying. He's able to make it to her just before the bus is about to hit her, but there's no time to get her out of the way. Instead of just diving out of the way himself, the soldier lies on top of the girl so that he can shield her body with his own. The soldier is about to sacrifice his life to save hers, but nobody is going to die if I can help it. I grit my teeth and run even faster. Somehow, I'm able to make it to them a second before the bus is about to run them over. I probably could have tried just grabbing the two of them and pulling them to safety, but the only plan I can think of is to stop the bus by any means necessary. So, I stand right in front of them and stare down the front of the school bus as it barrels towards me. I brace for the impact, and right before the bus hits me, I hold out my arms and try to stop it. I remember hearing about mothers who have lifted cars to save their trapped children, yet it still shouldn't be possible for a person to stop a school bus that's traveling at least 60 kilometers an hour. The thing is, I didn't stop to think about possible. The only thing I was thinking about was saving the two people behind me who would be crushed if I didn't do anything. As soon as the bus hits me, it's like it drove into a concrete pole. The front of the bus crumbles as if it's made out of cardboard, and most of the engine bonnet instantly caves in on itself. The front windshield of the bus explodes on impact, so pieces of glass and metal go flying in all directions. As for me, it feels like I had just been tackled by a refrigerator, but I somehow managed to stand my ground against the massive vehicle. Although my arms feel like lead, I don't stop pushing against the bus until it comes to a complete stop. With the bus no longer moving, I step away from it and notice that the force of the bus hitting me made two small dents in the asphalt where I had been standing. I look down at the soldier and the girl, who are both thankfully unharmed. They look back up at me gratefully, but surprised. I hold my hand out for the soldier, which he takes, and I help him up. I then help the girl up, and she immediately hugs me and then the soldier. With all three of us now on our feet and unharmed, the nearby crowd begins cheering. The girl, obviously embarrassed, runs back over to her friends, leaving just the soldier and I standing in front of the me-sized dent in the school bus. "That was incredible. I can't believe you were able to save us," he says, looking at me in awe. I take a second to study the soldier more closely. The sunglasses that he was wearing had fallen off, so I can now see his face more clearly. He's a young man, probably in his mid-20s, and is obviously still a bit shaken up about nearly getting run over. Regardless, when I look into his eyes, I can tell that he has no intention of hurting me. You were willing to die to save that girl. So, I don't care that you guys were just holding me at gunpoint. You're obviously not bad people, and I was not about to let a good person get killed if I could prevent it. The soldier thinks this over for a second and then smiles. We didn't know if you were a threat or not. We also don't have much experience dealing with people like you. But now that we know you're not a threat, we need you and that other girl who was exposed to the radiation to come with us. Well, who are you guys? He looks at me apologetically and says, I'm sorry, but we can't tell you that until the two of you agree to come with us. I notice that he never gives me an option not to go with them. Even with that in mind, I know that I should agree to go with the soldier. Now that I'm completely sure what I can do, it probably isn't a good idea to be around other people until someone explains exactly what happened to me. Just as I'm about to answer the soldier, I'm cut off by a blood-curdling scream. I look over to where the scream is coming from to find Tessa lying on the ground next to two soldiers. One of the soldiers is picking himself up, and I realize that he must have tackled Tessa when the bus was coming towards them to get her safely out of the way. I race over to them to make sure that Tessa is okay. Before I can make it to them, Tessa jumps to her feet and grabs the soldier closest to her. I freeze mid-stride as I watch Tessa pick the surprised soldier up with one hand and throw him across the parking lot with an impossible amount of strength. The soldier flies through the air and lands next to a small group of his fellow soldiers. Although he hits the ground pretty hard, it doesn't seem like the soldier is too badly injured. Tessa, I say as I walk towards her, it's okay. These guys aren't going to hurt you. Please, just calm down. It doesn't even seem like she can hear me. After getting over his shock, the second soldier grabs his rifle off the ground and tries to point it at Tessa. She sees this coming and grabs the soldier's arm, pulling the gun out of his hands with ease. Tessa then throws the gun so far that I lose sight of where it lands and kicks the soldier in the chest, sending him flying backwards. I finally realize that Tessa is just as strong as I am. The radiation from the meteor must have given her the same strength as me. However, that doesn't explain why she's acting like this. So I step in front of her before she can turn her attention to another soldier. Tessa, I know you're scared, but I promise you that these guys won't hurt you. But if you keep attacking them, then they might be forced to. While I was talking to her, Tessa kept her head down and her eyes glued to the ground. It isn't until I finish talking that she slowly looks up at me. The second I see her face, I take a step back because I realize why she attacked those soldiers. When Tessa screamed, it wasn't because she was scared. It was because she was angry. She didn't attack those soldiers because she was scared that they might hurt her. She did it because she wanted to hurt them. Tessa is now breathing heavily and her entire body trembles in anger. I look into her eyes and see that they are no longer a beautiful brown, nor are they full of her usual kindness and compassion. Both of her eyes are currently glowing bright yellow and filled with rage. Tessa? I ask, but I'm not even sure that the person standing in front of me is Tessa. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this chapter, then please remember to leave a like on the video and subscribe to my channel. New episodes of Strength drop on Tuesdays and Fridays, but if you'd like to see the chapters early and support the channel for only $5 a month, then head on over to my Patreon page. Link is in the description. Also, you can purchase the full paperback novel on my website if you're in Canada, or on Amazon if you live outside of Canada. Thanks again, and I'll be back in a few days with the next episode.